Hello and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to the Season 4 finale of Frame and Reference with Greig, Fraser, ACS, ASC, DP of Dune Part 2. I just wanted to say thanks so much to everyone for listening this year. We're only going to take a very short break before Season 5 gets started. We got a lot of great interviews coming up that I've already recorded, but I'm going to take... I'm shooting a gig next week if you're listening to this when it comes out, and then, it's Christmas and stuff. So January, start right back up in January, every Thursday, as usual. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so on Patreon or even buymeacoffee.com, going to patreon.com/frameandrefpod. And if you do listen to this podcast, please share it with your friends, post about it. It all helps. I've never taken a sponsor for this show, so it's great just to have people listening, and as many people as can listen is what I want for Christmas. But anyway, I usually keep these intros short, but as it's the season finale, I figured I'd say hello. And you're gonna love this one with Greig. He's a very nice man, and really appreciated its time, and I'm sure we'll have him back on soon. So once again, episode 169, nice, with Greig, Fraser, ASC, ACS, DP of Dune Part 2. Enjoy. I actually started this podcast because of the Deacons one, because over the pandemic I had nothing to do. And I got to meet them. They were doing a signing of Byways. Yep. And so I had already made stickers for the podcast and everything. I was like, thanks. Mine is basically because of yours. And I gave him, and James looked up, she's like, oh, so cool. And Roger was just like, I always tell people, I'm like, that is James's podcast. Roger's there. She's definitely the force.
Yeah, definitely. But what's wonderful though is when Roger becomes like a teenager again, learning about things. That's what I really enjoyed listening to. But you're right, James is the tour de force, definitely. But yeah, Roger's definitely he's learning, and I think he's enjoying that aspect of things.
Yeah, it's so funny because everyone obviously points to him as sort of the modern godfather of cinematography, and it's like the more I listen to him, the more I'm like, I think he's learning a lot. Like it feels like he kind of got picked off documentary film, and he's like, I still don't know what I'm doing. We're all like, no, you're good.
Well, one little story I tell about Roger, which I don't think's an unofficial story, but I was doing Let Me In with Matt Reeves back in 2009,
right?
And there was a scene in it where it's in the forest and there's snow and it's black. There's no street lights. Like it's just black in the forest. And I said to Roger, I was like, how would you do that? Like you're in the snow, you put up a big balloon and it's going to light the snow too much. And like, how would you light the snow? And he effectively goes, oh, I don't know. He goes, whenever I read that in the script, exterior night, he said he gets the heebies, which means he gets terrified. And I was like, you're awesome. You're Roger Deakins, and you're a human being that gets terrified about a scene not knowing how to shoot it. I think that's so humbling and so humble, to know he does that. So I don't know. I think he's obviously, I think he's just human when it comes to the anxieties that as DPs we have, that I have, that all my colleagues have, despite maybe pretending that we don't.
Well, and it's also like, no matter how many reps you get in, every project's new. So it's like, it's not that I've already solved this problem. I've just solved a problem similar, and that's not the same thing.
No, but also too, I mean, one of the things about, cinematography is hopefully you can do new challenges every time you do a film. That's what I look for. I try and problem solve different problems each film. So, that's part of the enjoyment, is when you get to the end of a film and you've now learnt something new. You've learnt how to, shoot on a different camera or a different format with a different color space or different lenses, or, using different technology. So that's where I, for example, like love doing The Mandalorian. Like that was, I think doing Mandalorian, I prepped that for more than 6 months, I think. because that was what was required to kind of come up with a game plan about how to actually shoot that thing on a volume, and how to properly give ourselves the right amount of lead in so that we had success. But I remember going home every day and my head hurt. It hurt from just all this new information, learning about panels and what angle they should be and what angle they start changing color and what happens when you put it at that angle on a reflection versus that angle versus that angle. And therefore, okay, the chess game that we play going, all right, so you put Mando in front of that panel doing that, and it's going to have a weird reflection here. So therefore, where can you put him on the stage? Therefore, where can you build that piece of the script? Every day, my brain would hurt and I would learn 1,000 new things. And then by the next day, I would have forgotten 950 of them because they were things that needed to disappear out of my brain, that had been solved. So yeah, that's challenging.
Yeah, I interviewed one of the DPs from The Mandalorian, and I remember having to wrap my head around, okay, obviously the volume is lighting things naturally. Obviously you got the reflections and stuff, but I was like, where are you putting lights? Because at the time, when I did the interview, there was no wasn't a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So it was just a concept in my head. And he was talking about how oh yeah, sometimes we'll just put a white square, on the screen or for fill or whatever. And there was also normal fixtures, but immediately my nerd brain went well, what's the TLCI of a screen? Does it still give the same look or does it, even out or whatever? But obviously that technology's gotten a lot better.
Well, it has, but you're right, and there is issues when it comes to skin tone as well. If you and I think some of the misconceptions about volume shooting is that it you can do anything on it, and the reality is that you can't. And when you do try and put everything onto it, then you're going to have a degree of failure. And when we even conceived of the idea of shooting a Mandalorian like that, we threw around ideas of flat LED screens and half curves and all that stuff. But the power of the volume is the fact that when you don't have to light, because what it does is it replaces the real world. So it's like me saying to you, all right, you're going to go into the desert at dusk. Are you going to bring tons of lights? I mean, no, you want to enjoy the beauty of the light for the dusk. That's where the power of the volume happens, where you don't actually have to light. And because there's not a lot of space for lights. Doesn't mean you can't add lights, because of course there are, there you can put sun slashes and you can put HMIs through windows and, because the volume doesn't have contrast, that you can't push light very hard. But it's trying to, the power of it, I think, comes as a pre-built lighting volume. That's for me where the power of volume is.
Do you know if there's because obviously with LED display or OLED displays, for monitoring, black is black because the diode's not on. Is that technology going to the volume that Because I imagine that would help some of the contrast issues.
Yeah, I don't know. No, I don't think that's the problem with the contrast, because those panels are quite dense. The black is quite black, and some of the concerns that people might have had before we built this thing was, well, you've got a LED screen here, but there's an LED screen there lighting me. What happens here when it's black? Does it bounce off that? And yes,
sure.
There's a little bit of reflection there, but they're quite dense. They're designed to be quite dense, and so they don't really reflect light. They do a little bit, and that reduces the contrast a bit. But when I talk about contrast, I'm talking about the ability between this black panel and you put a white square on it at 100%. It doesn't put out a lot of light. It doesn't put out the equivalent of a light of a vortex, for example. So when we get panels that are higher output, and the ability to run them at, I don't know if they run at 5,000 nits now, but eventually they'll be 50,000 nits.
Right.
And then they'll have a little bit of punch. The light will create a bit of shadow or shape.
Yeah. Well, you've been one of the sort of, I suppose, nerdier DPs out there, always pushing, obviously, the infrared stuff. And I took some other notes, because you've been doing infrared stuff for over a decade, right? Not just Dune. I mean, that was just the final iteration of it almost.
Yeah, well, I do believe that was kind of everything led up to Dune, because I was looking for a reason to use infrared like that, because it's such an amazing look. Like
it's awesome.
It's incredible, right? And you can't beat it. Like every
In the
time
theater, I did like when that first transition happens between, which I guess you must have crossfaded between like a regular Alexa and the infrared one. Yeah. And I leaned over to my girlfriend and I nudge her and I go, infrared. And she's like, what? And I was like, never mind. Just sorry.
Is she in the business?
No, she's a dancer.
No. So she thought you were an idiot then,
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. She gets enough of it, from me.
It's always good to nerd out with non-film people. They're like, what? Why are you geeking out over glass? Like I have these sometimes new lenses at home that just sit on my dining room table that constantly get moved every time we have dinner. Yeah. My wife's like, what's that? It's like glass, like cups, it's like that. Like, no. You don't understand. There's something about that bit of glass with that bit of glass. It's the radiation in it. It's the coatings, and I don't know. It's funny. It is funny geeking out like that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, the, amount of, this has been talked about a lot on this podcast, but just there has been an explosion of lens options. It used to be you'd either get your Cooks or your Master Primes, maybe a K35 here or there, and that was kind of it. And now like a lot of these like Chinese companies or local rehousers or whoever, it feels like there's almost too many options.
I mean, I don't think you actually can have too many options, but I know what you're saying. But we start to go, whoa, you're just swamped with choice. It brings a smile to my face every time I see a new lens released. I wouldn't want to be an old school film like lens company right now, right. But at the same time, those companies we need to embrace, like the Cooks and the Zeisses and the companies that have been making lenses for that long, because there's something about that glass that's very beautiful. But you're right. It seems to be that, there's a lot of new Chinese glass, like a lot of Soviet era glass, like with the Iron Glass team, and I think it's fantastic, because I think with film disappearing at the rate it has been disappearing, it used to be that we had access to multiple stocks and multiple 500 tungsten stocks. If you recall, there were multiple 500 Ts that had different contrast levels. Exactly. Fuji's gone, and we now really only have access to a few different stocks. Thank goodness we still have those. But there's not that many cameras working at the moment, professional cameras either. When you think about it, I mean, yes, we know about Canons and we know about the Duranos and stuff like that, but there's actually not much choice when it comes to cameras either. Right. So the more choice we have, the more exciting it gets. And I'm a strong advocate of suppliers who go out on a limb to create products that we can use, be it from lens companies, be it from rehousing companies, like the Zero Optic in LA, who I just love what they're doing. I love their mantra. I love their
Alex
philosophy.
Is my buddy. I love him.
Incredible. I mean, what a cool geek. You know what I mean? Lens geek. Talk about geeking out on glass. I mean, and I don't know. Like, I think that there's something really good about that having those options. And I would love it if somebody was to shoot a lens off. In fact, Lens Grid did something like that. In fact, because I used it for when I was choosing lenses for Vice. I went and saw a screening that they put on for me, and I narrowed down my choices. I had the same problem because I had Cooks and Master Primes and K35. I had like too many choices, and I was going a bit stir crazy with all the choices.
Yeah.
And the test that they did, I remember I narrowed it down to 2 or 3 lenses to test. So yeah, that's a good point. We should do something like that again. That would be a great idea.
Yeah, I think they have a website now. Whatever test you saw, I think is online, and it's primarily anamorphics. Maybe it's also spherical, but yeah, it's like the same exact shot. Well, now you've got Marcus Forder with his the lens flare thing, which is really instructive.
Oh, it's great. I mean, it's really fantastic. I mean, those type of resources I think are also really fantastic as well. So yeah, I mean, I love it. I also love the fact that these lenses are getting quite a bit cheaper as well.
Yeah.
Meaning, you know, obviously if you're making a movie, you need the backing of a rental company, and rental companies, that's what you're paying for when you're renting equipment is the backing of
Yeah.
the support. But if you're an owner operator, and you want to go out and do a small movie or a short film or there's no reason not to. You can't buy these or borrow them or.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, Laua just sent me. They're sitting behind me. I just got them like 2 days ago. These nanomorph full frame 1.5 X's because there was way too many 1.3s, and I was like, that's not enough anamorphic to be interesting.
Yeah.
But they're looking pretty good. My main concern now with like these modern lenses coming out, even the anamorphics, is that because it's like the reverse problem of original lenses, which are all handmade and had like character, and everyone was trying to remove it, because film wasn't as receptive. And now it's like the computers are grinding them, so they're like too perfect. And now, especially with something like anamorphic, but certainly with spherical, you lose a little bit of that. Now it's like anamorphic in name only. It's like technically it looks like that. I don't care necessarily about the flares, although they're fun. But it's like I kind of want a little, like to your point about like all the new lenses and people making them. I want to take Nikkor AIS primes and put them behind an anamorphic block.
Yeah,
I think that'd be my hero lens.
That would be beautiful. That's what I think. The manufacturers that are making lenses, either in China or in in Europe, that's what they need to hear.
Yeah.
But I'll push back a little bit against the 1.3 times squeezes. I know what you mean by it not being anamorphic enough, but there's something about them which is very interesting, and I'm talking about the Viltroxes particularly.
Sure.
Because the Viltroxes are technically superb lenses, and they do lack some of that kind of that funkiness that exists with some of those the Blazers or whatever, but they're very interesting. They're very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and obviously it doesn't surprise me to hear you talk about like those, because obviously I interviewed Oren for obviously the creator and stuff. Yeah. And I kind of wanted to pick your brain about the sort of sweet spot between, I heard in an interview you were talking about how like Fincher has these sort of unreal reality moment, Fight Club and all this. And that doesn't work for a much larger film. And I was wondering, in your head, with all the, new, very affordable technologies, where do you go from like a, let's say, low budget film that needs a little bit of extra production value and a little bit of extra zhuzh versus a huge film such as Dune that needs to be bolted to the floor, basically, or Batman, where it's like the camera's got to be on the lens or not, or on the camera. We can't be flying around because that takes it too far into the other direction.
Yeah. I don't know how that, I don't necessarily agree that if you don't have budget that you need to add zhuzh to, I do know what you're saying. Obviously on a $1 million small movie, you're not going to put a person on a sandworm and, ride him for 15 minutes. I know because of all the limitations of that. But there's something really about, I'm deep diving at the moment. I've just finished a film, and it's a classic thing. It's like I've saved up all of my film bullets for the time that I have off, so I can rewatch and rediscover and relearn, and because I don't watch any films when I'm shooting. So I'm rewatching Ratcatcher again. Lynn Ramsey. Talk about lack of zhuzh. Like there's no zhuzh in that film whatsoever, but it's stunning. It's one of the most stunning films that I think I've ever seen. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's all about intimacy with characters. There's, it doesn't do anything that's funky or interesting in a traditional sort of way. It's very grounded and very simple and very beautiful. So I don't know. I'm on a Lynn Ramsey deep dive at the moment. Lynn Ramsey and Alan Kutcher deep dive.
Yeah. I did want to talk about sort of going back to the idea of like modern affordable gear and stuff like that. I was looking through the ASC document that you had put together, that like 135-page joint about the making of Dune 2. And on the one hand, I'm looking at it and I'm going like, well, that's 1,000 fixtures, that's 200 fixtures. But then you see the images and you're like, this is relatively simple conceptually. It's like liberal use of ultra bounce just for, light, a couple spots, some top light. And I had heard you mention a bunch about how you like to keep things simple. And I was wondering if you could kind of elucidate how you conceptualize ideas of, needing that many fixtures or that much space or whatever versus you trying to keep things simple.
It's funny because when producers hear that I want to keep things simple, they assume that I don't need many lights. But the problem is that when you've got a large stage and a big lighting like idea, be it slashes of sun on, let's say, in the seats, right? You need lots of lights to create that, or you need the biggest light that has ever been made, the gods ever made, the sun, and you need it to be consistent in the sky at the right time of day. And you need to have no roof on the studio, none of which is going to fly. You can't do any of it. So the only thing we can do is we can try and imitate what that sun does. And like those slashes, as easy as an idea as they sound like they are really hard to create. Like everybody who's ever lit with two lights know that you put them side by side, you create multiple shadows. And we know, the audience knows somebody walks through multiple shadows, so they look like they're on stage. They're being lit by multiple park hands or something. So the challenge with that was always to create big single light sources, which again is very hard to do. And we tested multiple fixtures, we tested multiple ways of doing it, we tested HMIs, we tested all sorts of things. And we discovered that the vortex, the cream source vortexes,
love them.
Which
love them.
Game changing, I must say. The film exists. The film exists the way it exists because of the vortexes.
Yeah.
Not only because of the fact that they could withstand the dust. I mean, there's a lot of dust in this film, but just the punch and the soft. They imitate the soft sun better than a soft sun. And the ability to shape them and cut them and pixel map them and, all those things meant that was the reason why we were able to create those slashes the way we were, because of vortexes. And we had great support from MBS in getting us the vortexes as well. That must be said as well, because
you must have had all of them.
Maybe. I mean, we had a lot. We didn't have all that we wanted. I mean, I'll be a little bit, I'll be a little bit ungrateful for a second and say we didn't quite get all the ones we wanted to get. But again, I know I'm being a little,
Yeah.
Who was the character in Willy Wonka that fell into the
Augustus?
Fell into the van. Yeah, was it Augustus? No, it was
in the vent. Veruca.
The girl, Violet Beauregard.
Violet. Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't have it. She got all the.
No, Violet ate the gum. Sorry, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Violet ate the gum, and Veruca Salt fell into the. After her singing, she fell into the goose chute.
Yeah, because she got given everything, but she just didn't quite have enough. Yeah. That was me on this film.
Yeah.
I was Veruca Salt. I had some amazing lights, but I still needed a bit more. I wasn't like that. I was very humble and nice, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but still, conceptually, it's like you said, one large soft source. Because like part of the podcast, I try to obviously, it's like I just like people hearing what goes through people's heads and just not necessarily specifics all the time, but it is primarily, or I guess secondarily, I don't know, an educational resource. And part of that is I think my point was just to say that someone can see those diagrams and get very oh, I'll never be there. But it's think of it as, copying someone's lighting setup will never give you the same result because nothing's ever the same. But if you just look at it and conceptualize it, it's one soft key, big, one top light. That's achievable. Maybe not on that scale for everyone, but the idea is there. And I've noticed that with a lot of the Batman and specifically Rogue One and even Vice. I remember sitting in Vice and there's a scene where Dick Cheney and Bush are sitting there outside talking at lunch or something.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there in the theater and going, that looks way too good. And then I saw the behind the scenes photo and it was just neg everywhere. I loved it.
And there was a bit of neg there. Neg's cheap too.
Yeah,
Next
that's what I'm
cheap.
saying.
Next cheap. I learned that in Australia from DP named Graham Wood,
Mm.
who's a DP out of Melbourne, and I used to be a film loader on his sets, and that was how he used to shoot exteriors, and it makes total sense when you're doing stuff with not very much money. Neg fill is very cheap. It shapes the light really well. Don't need a generator for it. You just have to hope it's not windy. And it shapes the light beautifully. Um, Obviously, when you're on stage, you don't like neg fill doesn't really work because there's no lights.
It's
You have
just
to put lights in. Yeah, neg fill exists. But I think going back to that point about looking at those lighting diagrams, I would hope that people don't look at it and go, "I'll never." That's so many lights. I'll never get to that point. I pray actually that wouldn't happen. And in fact, if that is happening, I'd be slightly regretful about publishing that document, because what I hope people take away from it actually is the organization required from a crew perspective.
yeah.
You know, we did at times have a lot of lights, and I'm very fortunate about that. No, jokes aside, of course, I'm very fortunate to be able to have been supported so well.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, it's about, there would have been other lamps to use had we not had cream sauce. We would have figured out another solution. You know what I mean? I might have had
1200
pockets of
Ds
light.
on there. That's
Well, exactly. I might have had
incredibly
pockets of
affordable,
light
but yeah.
with 1200 HMIs. I might have had, and so there are other ways. And I think hopefully it's more about the aesthetic choices that one makes,
Right.
as opposed to the technically how they actually make them.
Yeah. Oh man, I've said this a million times on this pod. Every episode I say this, and you almost said it verbatim in an interview I saw, which is I'm going to put it on a T-shirt or a sticker. I don't know, but technically correct is almost never better than emotionally correct. To your point about backlighting Darth Vader instead of front, it's always like the feeling is always so much more important, and that's why I really appreciate in that document you include the photos, because if you see that, if you're a somewhat experienced photographer or cinematographer, you'd go like, oh, backlit soft source, okay, and then you see the diagram and you go, oh, got it, versus just seeing the diagram, and going, ah, shit.
Yeah. Yep. Hopefully hopefully it looks simple. That's the takeaway for me, is that when my mum watches the movie, that she doesn't that she doesn't think about anything that I've done. Like it literally just it blazes away, and it becomes part of the emotional journey. Again, going back to Vader, I mean, that's the thing. It's like that moment needed to have a punch in the guts to it, and the way I lit it first, didn't. And I was just like, oh, head scratch. With, I thought this was going to be amazing. The lightsaber comes on, and it wasn't. It was like air was let out of a balloon. But I think on Dune Part 2, we were able to sort of illuminate these beautiful sets that Patrice built. And again, part of that document was a love letter to Patrice. I've said to him personally that I love him.
The insert shots of everything are just gorgeous.
I mean, listen, it's a love letter to his talent, So, and the way he and Denis work together is incredible. I mean, to be part of that, to be a witness to that, to those two, Denis directing Patrice and the world building that they do together, it's quite fantastic.
Well, and that's brings up another thing that I've said a million times, is like, again, we're talking about the simplicity of the lights, and a lot of times I remember you mentioning somewhere else that, like, simplifying the frame, and that actually brings me to coloring in a minute, but simplifying the frame, keeping everything, only the stuff that it needs, highlights how important for any film production design and costuming are. Because you could do that same lighting setup and have it be an apartment, and it might look cool, but it's not going to look the way it does, the way it doesn't do
totally
anything like that.
I mean, it's one of the things, and I know that I'm hearing myself talk about this, but if it was 20 years ago or it was 25 years ago, I would be sort of pinching myself, like I am anyway, but to be able to work with people like Patrice, and our incredible design and costume department and construction and all those things, just to be able to put that in front of the lens is quite magical. But it also put a pressure on me to perform. You know what I mean? Like, I'm faced with such beautiful costumes, such beautiful design. It's up to me to now like not
Celebrate it.
Yeah, not screw it up. Because the thing is that I could have very easily if I didn't work as hard as I could have pre-lighting and getting the lighting mood right. You know.
Yeah. Well, and the revisiting the idea of like natural light and neg and stuff. Obviously, in the sets, as we've mentioned, big soft source, top light, whatever. But exterior, obviously, in the desert, mostly sun. And I was wondering how much modification of that sun you were actually doing in those desert scenes.
In short, very little. Bounce, a little bit of neg sometimes, but very little. It's about where you place people and how you place them, and what time of day you shoot. Because the second that you start running, again, this is purely my opinion, what I like about cinematography though is that everybody has a different opinion. Like, everybody, when you speak to other cinematographers and other filmmakers, they all have different opinions, which I think is so healthy.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to watch a movie that looks like I shot it. That's probably the last film that I want to see is a film that I shot, because, I know how to solve that problem. I know how I would have done it. So I don't want to see that. I want to see how somebody else would have done it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in the case of daylight outside, it's impossible to replicate daylight, like outside. I think. I mean, I wouldn't say impossible because somebody will prove me wrong, but I think it's impossible.
You did a good job in the first one. Those that like one fight scene where everyone comes out of the dirt and it's like in that kind of pillar light. I remember that one being kind of a head scratcher.
Well, okay. So do you know how we did that? You would have seen the behind the scenes, right?
Yeah. No, I saw it. Yeah, I remember you guys discussing like that was going to be a pain, and then simplicity won out.
Well, yeah. I mean, we just shot it outside at the right time of day. Like I said, like we chose an outdoor set with no ceiling. We made a gobo that created shadow. We using Unreal, we tracked the sun and said, okay, between 10:33 and 11:05, it's providing that. We rehearsed, we shot. Like it was super simple. Like, but 100% agree. Like that's the type of scene that you see in the concept art, and you say, okay, I can't light this. That's impossible to light. I mean, it's impossible to shoot on a stage. It's impossible to create that shadow on the ground. It's impossible to have somebody go from light to shade with that much harshness. Not just someone, but a group of people. And the only way to have done it was to build something outside, which in itself poses problems. So again, we had a great rigging set up with our key grip worked out, where we had fabrics that came across, and then the gobo was cut into them so they could be opened and closed if the wind picked up, because obviously it's a massive wind tunnel, and if it's too windy we couldn't have shot. And I do remember the wind picking up and ripping some pieces at some point as well. So yeah, it was a head scratch for sure.
Well, and actually one of the things to give a shout out to the VFX team, because they've done incredible on both these films. Well, pretty much every film we've worked on, but different teams obviously. But I didn't realize like a handful of those dudes were digital. Like whenever we think about, digital effects, it's always big explosion, flying thing, sci-fi. And it's like, no, guys coming out of the dirt, and they weren't. I saw the breakdown. Whoever was ILM or whoever did it. Who did it? Why was I guessing?
DNEG, I think. DNEG.
Oh, DNEG.
DNEG, I think.
And, but they weren't even like that high resolution, or they were just, very simple. It's awesome when you can pepper in stuff like that.
Well, on part two, what was really exciting that was different to part one is that the evolution of shooting virtually had evolved. Mm-hmm. So there's a sequence that we shot virtually. Chani's fight at the end of the film, where she comes up out of the dirt, she runs, she kicks someone, she does a roundhouse, she's super badass fighter, and then turns at the end towards the camera. That was built through motion capture and through 3D modeling, and then we lensed it, and then we shot Zendaya for real, and they linked it in. Like it's it's a great way to shoot that scene. And I meant that Denis and I got to actually shoot it, but we were not standing in the desert. We were standing in in a capture volume in Playa Vista, shooting something that had been captured and rendered. So again, I think what's interesting to take note of for the entire movie is how technology has evolved even over the period of time that we did part 1 to part 2. But also that we embraced all of that technology for part 1 and part 2. We embraced all the technology that we had access to at that point in time.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known that. It's what Todd Vaziri over at ILM is always harping about online. It's like, you don't like, well, and another guy did like a whole series about this, but you don't dislike VFX, you dislike bad VFX. And when you have shot selection and you have intent, you empower the VFX artist to do the job that they're capable of versus rushing them, changing everything last second, doing all that. That's when it fails. And it's not, it's not necessarily the artist's fault that it looks bad. Usually it's, they do the best in spite of what they've been given,
Well, and that's the thing too, because I've seen it where you give the VFX artists the right intent, is the right light. In the case of the sandworm writing that we did for part 2, or the interior ornithopter that we did for part 1, that you shoot with the right light. Again, I think light is critical. Again, I know it's my bent, right? But at the same time, I'm positive that as humans, we've evolved to understand when light's not right. Like it helps us understand when light's not right. When the sun's going down, when there's storms coming in, when there's shadows, all those things help us evolve as humans. So when we see something on screen where the light's not quite right because it's been tweaked in post or hasn't been shot properly, or you know what I mean? Like, so I think shooting it as the basis properly, and this is where Paul Lambert, who was our VFX supervisor on both part 1 and part 2, he's a massive advocate for correct light. Like, of all the VFX supervisors, and I've worked with some incredibly talented teams, as you said, Paul is such a sort of so diligent when it comes to shooting it with the right light, and that's his bent, really. So, and I can't kind of give him enough hugs when I see him for that, because it helps me shoot it beautifully. And then hopefully you don't see the link in post. If you freeze frame and go, okay, really, what is this? You of course can figure out what we shot. Like, if you're a smart person and you know a little bit about VFX and shooting, you can sort of tell what we've done. But hopefully when you're watching the movie, nothing stands out or jumps as being a VFX job, Well, and anyone who's pausing a movie, gulag. Absolutely.
I hate when people go like, oh yeah, I got about halfway through it and then I went and got dinner. I'm like, why aren't you scheduling to finish the thing? Why are you watching half of it?
Well, you bring a bedpan and you bring a snack. You do not leave that couch or the theater.
I feel like I almost talked about it and then didn't, but it's nice to bring it back around to it, because I was interviewing Oren about the creator. And when I think about a lot of your films, I often think about, again, that simplicity, like Krennic in the field, just like gorgeous shot, stuff like that. But I also think about like color and unification of color. I'm a DP, if that wasn't apparent. But, over the pandemic, I had to become a freelance colorist because no one's hiring a, non-union EP for anything. And it was a huge learning experience, both on the side of like, oh, here's something, time saving on set for my own personal stuff, where I'm like, okay, I know I can knock that down. But he had mentioned that you guys, we're working with the LUT and everything like that. And he had mentioned something about like kind of a way to unify colors that snapped everything into place and made it look very filmic. And I developed a version of that in Resolve based on what he described, with just using the color warper and like pinching everything into two things and then dialing it down. But I was wondering if you could speak to specifically what that was. Because my little method I use on everything now. It looks great.
I listen, I don't know, to be honest with you. And again, I rely very heavily on my technical buddies. As if you haven't noticed, I'm a simple person. Okay, like I have a simple mind, I have a simple brain, like I'm a kind of a simple human.
So give yourself some credit. You've done a lot of
too much information in my brain can sometimes cause me brain ache.
Yeah.
So there are some things that I let people who are better at that handle, and the color, Dave Cole at Photochem, and all of his color scientists, handle that. But I think, did I explain to you the way that Gareth explained that to Dave?
I don't remember. No.
Maybe he did. But he said, Dave, just imagine you're at a wedding, and the reds and the oranges on the bride's side, and the blues and the greens are on the groom's side. Like, put them onto different sides of the church wedding. Like, I don't know where that description came from, but he kind of described it as a wedding, and you need to make sure you divide them up so you kind of keep them in their place and you don't let them seep into each other. And
I think that he didn't tell me that, but I think that was something that helped click for me, was just purity of color, in the sense that, like, when you shoot film, there was a bit more purity. Now with digital, that skin can get very blotchy very quickly if you don't take care of it.
And it's also because again, the technology is improving. I say that in inverted commas. Like, these amazing sensors are being built by these amazing companies that are doing such amazing work, and they're amazing sensors. And by giving us amazing lenses and amazing sensors, and like sensors that have such a range of exposure, and maybe we lose something from some of that simplicity of 3 layers of acetate and red, green, and blue, and a base layer. Like, maybe we lose something by having so much choice now when it comes to technology. And I think color is exactly that way. If you watch images that were shot in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, they are different to the frames that are now. And I know there are film emulation LUTs, which I think are clever. But you've got to apply those. You've got to apply a look to something as opposed to something having a look. So I don't know what the future holds for that, because I wonder if there's a camera that comes out that completely goes back to 11 stops of dynamic range that has a very distinct color look, so you can choose the XYZ camera when you want to shoot exteriors, that the greens are desaturated but the reds are saturated. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Fujifilm has done that with their film emulations, although I don't know if you would shoot that burnt in, but certainly for my stills work, like I love those, just to kind of, I'm sure you know this, but like constraint brings creativity and joy. And I think 100 million solutions brings chaos and fear, but Adam Savage describes it as having, joyfully having branches hacked off your decision tree. Makes your choices way easier. You're like, oh, I have 3 options. I'll pick my favorite. Whereas if you have 1,000, you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. No, there's decision-making fatigue that comes with as well. So exactly right. But hopefully those 3 branches that you're left with are the 3 ones.
Yeah, one of them you want.
The hacked branches are not that's the danger of having someone or somebody who's not yourself hacking those branches, because it could be a somebody that doesn't share your aesthetic, like a producer or a budget person, or somebody that's not kind of in that same world as you.
Yeah. I did want to ask, because I just heard in an interview that whenever you do kind of sort of, I suppose, take the reins on coloring or get in there, that you do so with no audio track.
Yeah.
Or you said you did that at least once.
Yeah, I did that on Dune, exactly. I do that generally. I try not to listen to the audio track. It's distracting.
So what's funny is I do the same thing, but mostly because my friends are low budget and they haven't finished the audio, and they're like, here's the images, just figure. But I did on this documentary that my buddy kept sending me notes like, nah, it needs to be darker, it needs to be whatever. And then I finally heard the audio and I was like, oh, this guy's like, this conversation needed to look way different. And I was wondering kind of, did that happen, especially with like a Hans Zimmer score or something, that will definitely affect the way that the images will be perceived, and how often do you have to adjust, for that?
Yeah, it didn't happen on Dune that we had to adjust very much, but you're 100% right. If there's a track that you're not expecting, that changes the tone of the scene, yes, you're absolutely right. You're probably worth knowing about that. But you would generally, I would have seen an edit of the film
Right.
in advance. Like I would have known that. So I will have seen the film. I will have known that tone that was required. So, but just grading with sound was just, I don't know. I
Well,
love
and
it. Yeah.
half the time you're pausing and advancing and pausing and advancing. You're not even hearing the full thing anyway. So
No, it's distracting. And I don't know, it helps keep you focused on what you should be looking at, which is color. Yeah.
yeah. I did want to talk about. I got your book here.
Ah, well done.
And I'm a huge, for this whole, if you can see it, this whole coffee table is just full of photo books. And it's always great when a DP releases one, or at least someone, I got Jeff Bridges's,
Yep.
I got Jeff Bridges'
Bridges.
Wide Luck's book. And it's really cool to see the behind the scenes stuff. But I was just kind of wondering, because I'd heard that you weren't intending necessarily to make a book about this, and certainly not one with Brolin sort of writing poetry around it and stuff like that. But I was wondering if you could walk me through, like, A, was this all shot on film? And B, how do you get, like, when you have, I'm just pulled up to Rebecca Ferguson here, like, do you go like, hey, I'm going to take a shot of you, stand this way so the light hit, or are you just like snapping like, a proud parent?
No, it's not as random as that. Sometimes it is, but yes, generally I'll see a little moment that something else is happening that we're not having to be shooting, and I'll ask Rebecca in that case to, can you stand there? Can you look this way? Can you look at camera for us? Like for me, it was actually a very interesting process making doing the book, because again, I wasn't shooting for a book, so that was important. That's important to note. On part one, Denis had asked me to shoot stills. He'd seen some of the stills that I was doing for fun. I used to be a photographer, so
Right.
I was rediscovering my joy of film. I was taking photos of the kids, and I was enjoying it actually. And he asked me to shoot for the movie, and I was like, oh, I don't think so, dude. Like that I don't want that responsibility. First of all, it was the first film that I was doing with Denis. I didn't want to screw that up, right? It was an amazing story, the unmakeable film. I didn't want to be the guy that screwed up the unmakeable film because I was busy off, taking photos of plants in the corner of the, when,
Right.
all that stuff. And so I said, listen, I don't think it's wise. But he did say, well, just think about it, because I said, I'll happily do it, but I don't want to be responsible for any of the images for PR. I don't want these images to have to go anywhere. And so the deal he and I made is that
them up anyway.
I wouldn't have said that. I like PR people.
I like PR people too, but no, I don't mean the ones we like. I mean, you'll get, like, one thing that I've noticed is, like, whenever there's a green screen in a shot, now they'll like get rid of it.
Yeah, true.
They like edit that out, and you're like, I like knowing that, but yeah.
So we effectively we promised each other that if I was going to shoot for ourselves, literally for ourselves. We just for fun for ourselves,
Yeah.
And then I got some images that worked well, and I met Josh, and Josh is an amazing writer. If you can clearly read that, he's
got a book too for people.
Well, he has got a book actually, and I've not yet read that. I've ordered it on Amazon, and I'm desperately looking forward to reading it, because one thing that I took away from his writing are the colors in his writing. I studied John Keats when I was doing the film Bright Star with Jane Campion, and I'd never really studied poetry or English literature as a kid. And what I got out of John Keats' poetry was eye-opening. It was literally like I was reading a world of color when I was reading his words. Like, two words next to each other that ordinarily would mean nothing could mean something so deep. And then what I love about filmmaking is that those two words next to each other with an image that accompanies it can just be earth-shattering, like life-altering, mind-blowing. Like, because it can also do the reverse too. It can destroy those two words, and it can, but I love it when the symbiosis works, when you have words and images that work together as a community, and they improve each other. And we were just working I was just reading some of his writing during part one, and he was sending me stuff that he was writing, and I was like, this is beautiful. Like, and it came the opportunity to do a book for part one, which we did, a limited edition book that went out with 10 years art of the production design for Dune.
Yep.
The art of Dune.
Yep.
And we loved it. We enjoyed it, and they asked us to do another one for part two. So we did it. And
Well,
yeah.
oh, there's another one.
Actually,
of these. Or are you talking about the other book?
No, there is a limited edition book that we came out for part one.
Oh, not of the. I'm confused now.
No, there was an earlier book that was only available as a limited edition.
Damn it.
Anyway,
keep an eye out for it. But what I was going to say was something I love about exposures is, to your point about like words and the way they're structured, is I love that the poetry is not captions. It's art directed in a way. And it really, and also like some of the paper is different. Like it is an experiential book that I really appreciated while flipping through it. That there's care put into the experience of reading it.
Yes, and hopefully you get out of it every time you delve into it. It's not just a series of images. I do feel a little bit. Maybe I'm becoming a little bit sort of negative in my old age, but I feel like images are becoming a little disposable.
Yeah. Oh no. 100% agree.
Yeah, and so it's really important for us as image makers to help stave off that overexposure of images. And it seems like everywhere you look, there are people creating images, and some great ones, by the way. But I feel like we're losing an element of the enjoyment of soaking in an image and really studying it and delving deeply into its meaning about what it means to us at that point as we see it. I mean, I've got so many memories as a teenager, reading like, some beautiful Ansel Adams books or David Moore, Australian photographer.
Ansel Adams print right there.
There you go. Right. And getting something out of it. You know what I mean? Listening to the emotional response that it gave me when I saw those images.
Yeah.
And so that's what I love about photography. And I guess that's what I love about cinematography, is that you kind of can do that. And I was never really good at editing my stuff, by the way. So that was my problem, is I was happy to shoot it, but then hand it off to somebody to deal with, which is exactly what you do as a cinematographer. You're just like, all right, I'm going home now. See you later. You can make the best out of this.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, like about disposability and stuff, like I think when you look at a painting, especially if it's actually, this is going to be a good way to wrap this up. When you look at a painting, especially when it's in a museum or something, that it took a lot of time to paint, obviously. So you're more inclined to sit there and kind of stare, hopefully not at every brush stroke, because I think people get a little too in the, that's like, oh, what cameras did you use kind of thing. But you take the whole thing, every stroke had intent. And so you're able to kind of sit there and read the intent. And I think with photography, it's harder and harder to find images with intent, because a lot of times they are snapshots, which snapshots are great for memory keeping. But in terms of making an image, like the old photographers, Ansel Adams, et cetera, Dan Winters, talk about making images. Oh, I made this portrait of Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever. And I always thought that was just kind of like old school, like, oh, we shot this picture. But it's like, no, you're making the image. You're not taking it, and I was, But the dovetail that I wanted to get to was obviously Dune 2 getting re-released. And I assume you probably have the same opinion I have, but I did want to ask you, how do you feel about not just more recent films, but even older films getting re-released in theaters? I personally, not to color your answer, but I personally think we should just keep doing that. If audiences aren't going to theaters as much as they used to, I'm fine with them putting, the OG Willy Wonka back and put Men in Black in the theaters again. Like bring people back out, get the experience going, get people in the mood to go see movies again. Not just when, like with Dune 2, we all loved it and just want more of it. It's like, let's do that for all of them. They're not totally. Movies used to be, how long was Gone with the Wind in the theaters? For like a year and a half, 5 years.
Yep. Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, my take on that is that part of the process of the enjoyment of seeing a film in a theater is sitting in a theater. It's going out of your way. It's not opening your laptop and downloading something, and like it's going out of your way. Like you are taking the time to get on a train, get in the car, to get into a theater, to watch all the trailers, to watch the lights go down. Like it's rigmarole. It's to see a film. It's a deal. It's a commitment. But I think that commitment helps invest the audience in that group experience, and it's such a. I mean, I agree with you about re-releases. You know, the idea of being able to go and see. I mean, I'm desperate to go and see Dune 2 in IMAX again, and I couldn't get tickets.
No, I tried to go to the Burbank one because that's like a great one and sold out immediately.
I was working here in the UK, and I sent Dania a screenshot about the IMAX. I couldn't get a seat. In fact, I think I could get a seat on a Thursday morning, first screening. It was at the front on the left, and that was in about 5 weeks from the date that I said. Like, I was like, I can't get a seat.
Yeah, you should be able to send an email to somebody.
You would have thought so, right?
Yeah, Burbank.
But I couldn't get a seat. I wasn't going to sit up the front, obviously, but I couldn't get a seat. So I would love to go and see a rescreen.
Well, if you end up back in LA, we can go together and do you guys know who he is? Because you'd love that, I bet. I did want to say right before I let you go, one of the funniest things, I saw a special screening at the Academy Museum of Ferrari. And so Denis was there with Michael Mann, and Denis was doing the Q&A. And every third question, Michael would go, yeah, that was great. And obviously Eric Messerschmidt, blah, blah, blah. When do I get to see Dune 2? Like he would just interrupt him and go, can you send me the screener? Like he had no interest in talking about his film. He just wanted to see Dune 2. And I was like, yeah, that's right.
I'm sure they could arrange a screening for Michael Mann as well.
I'm sure they did.
Well, let's get it back in the IMAX theaters. I mean, that's why, like, I think Interstellar's being re-released on its 10th anniversary. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, that's beautiful film.
Yeah. Talk about speaking of Hans Zimmer, like that score is eternal. That song shows up once a day in my life. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, but still, it's everything. You know, it's as important of a score as Indiana Jones or anything. You know, it's that's a permanent fixture, I think, in world history, not even just film. And it's awesome when you can do that.
Hans Zimmer's power on Dune Part 2, like the soundtrack on Dune Part 2, the fact that there's all these discussions about Oscar. Anyway, but the power of his soundtrack on Part 2 is wild. Like during the sandworm ride,
tears,
of which we worked really hard. When Paul stands up, there's a shot that I did. I remember shooting the shot and being super enthusiastic about the shot when we shot it, right? Like as in, it's done, awesome. When I see that on an IMAX screen with Hans Zimmer's soundtrack, my God, it's like atoms move within my body. It's like things occur in my psyche that I never, ever, ever would have imagined when I was shooting that shot originally. I loved it when I first shot it, the shot, by the way. I knew where it fit in the sequence, but seeing it with the edit and seeing the lead up to it and seeing the lack of music before that point, he stands up, Zimmer cuts in, my Lord, like it's beyond powerful.
It literally lifts you out of the seat. I mean, it is, and again, power of going to the cinema,
and exactly right, because it is at the experience at the cinema with the proper surround sounds, all that stuff. Exactly right. It is beyond, and that's the important thing. That's why I think, to your point about re-releasing films and having a run. I mean, I think it's a genius idea.
Yeah. Well, I know you got a full schedule, so I have to let you go, but I would love to have you come back and chat. I mean, I've loved pretty much every movie you shot, so we could go in deep on even, like I said, Vice or anything like that. The Batman, whatever. But I would love to have you back on next time you have a
Thanks,
chance.
Kevin.
Yeah.
It's awesome to chat to you.
Yeah, you too, brother. Take care.
Thanks, Matt. Cheers, mate.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do so on Patreon by going to frameandrefpod.com, where you can get all the episodes, and clicking the Patreon button. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.